Hello everybody, DMGeezerjim here, continuing along our Planescape review series, review preview, information and all that kind of stuff. Continuing along in our format, now that 5th edition has released what it did, we know what they're giving us and we know what we're missing, so I want to kind of focus on tying the two in together and at least providing a quick summary or brief overview of the Outer Planes. 5th edition came with the Sigil and the Outlands book, which is pretty good. Pretty good. Leaves a lot of stuff lacking for the actual Outer Planes. So yeah, that's what I'll spend our time kind of going over in these series. So first and foremost, quickly checking our references. I'll be using the Turn of Fortune's Wheel adventure as one of the official sources for Automata. Today we're looking at Automata. Automata is the gate town that sits attached to lawful neutral. Remember last time we looked at Rigas attaching to Acheron. Lawful neutral with an evil bend. Militant despotism, if you could say that. I guess you could say dictatorship type. Just warfare for warfare's sake, not for glory's sake. Mechanus is the next step along our tour as we go clockwise from here, and this is lawful neutral dedicated to pure order, and so Automata is the gate town reflection of that. So yeah, the 5th edition, we'll take a quick look at the 5e information that they give us. Outland Sigil, Automata, gate destination of this town is the plane of Mechanus. Now 5th edition Planescape 5e tells us to go look to the DM's guide to find out about Mechanus. While I have the hyperlink up, let's do that. What is Mechanus? Laws reflected in a realm of clockwork gears, all interlocked and turning according to their measure. The cogs seem to be engaged in a calculation so vast that no deity can fathom its purpose. Mechanus embodies absolute order, and its influence can be felt on those who spend time there. Modrons are the primary inhabitants of Mechanus. The plane is also home to the creator of the Modrons, a godlike being called Primus. A couple optional impacts, optional rules that DMs can enforce on the Outer Planes to kind of give the nature of the plane mechanics, as it were. While on Mechanus, creatures always use the average damage result for attacks and spells. For example, if it do 1d10 plus 5, it always deals 10. 5 is the average plus your 5 average. That's not true. That's not even the average. That's some shitty math, wizards. 10 plus 5 is a 15. The average, that would be 7.5, dropping the fraction down to 7. So if you really want to do the averages, do the averages. Optional rule anyway. Number 2, optional rule imposing order. At the end of each long rest taken, a visitor who's not lawful neutral must make a DC 10 wisdom savings throw. On a failed save, their alignment shifts to lawful neutral. If you're not using alignments, then this is a non-factor. If you're using alignments in your campaign, this can be a lot of fun. I don't know what's come over me, but I feel compelled to make sure that my shoes are tied and everything is clean and all my stuff's in order. And, you know, oh God, you know, I'll become this OCD person for a little while. So you can have some fun with that from a roleplay mechanic. But that's it. That's the 5e information for Mechanus. So let's take it a step back and talk about the Gate Town, because that's what the product was focused on. It's a machine of law and order. The town's geography is as rigid as its bureaucracy. Its buildings meticulously maintained and erected with mathematical precision. The gate town's right-angled, 90-degree turns on everything, nearly identical establishments, flummox visitors, as in all the buildings look the same, but most the friendly Modrons that make up most of the population can navigate the grid with ease. There are obviously visitors of all shapes and sizes here, but it's primarily an ordered city. Now, it obeys a strict hierarchy of laws overseen by the Council of Order, a triumvirate of officials, including Aristimus, who represents the military establishment, Juliet 314, who's a Modron that represents the economic standpoints, and then Seraphil, who represents the religious standpoints, a sanctimonious tiefling who speaks on behalf of the temples. And then you have the underground. Actually, it's called the inverse, according to the 5e book. So every... I don't need that picture. Let me go back here. My apology. Every one of these gate towns that we see on the cosmic wheel is a physical representation of its associated plane. Bitopia via Trade Gate. So Bitopia is a representation of the values and the alignments of Bitopia on the neutral plane of the Outlands, okay? Ecstasy, etc., Sylvania, Glorium, Zaos, when you start getting over to Limbo, Bedlam, Pandemonium, etc. So some of these places are horrible. Some of these places are nasty. Some of them are nice. Some of them are pleasant. But all of them are just a step away from tipping into the plane that they connect to. So for everything in Automata that's ordered and precise and structured, there has to be a couple things that are chaotic and unordered and unstructured to make sure that Automata doesn't become part of Mechanus. And gate towns slide all the times. The lawful evil ones, for example, Ribcage. They talk about Ribcage. There's just being a line of them. When you get on the hell side of it, there's just town after town after town that's been sucked into Avernus. So, that's going to vary with your lore. And again, we'll take a look at each of those as we get there. Ironically, when a town disappears into Automata, you don't even know where the town is anymore. It just shows up as as another part of a gear. Everything is incorporated into the already existing machine. So, it's kind of scary for the people that live in the gate town that shift over, because in some instances, their whole way of life and even themselves could cease to exist. Some towns are trying. Automata in older lore is an example of one of the towns that's trying to join its plane. Okay? So, let's kind of keep that in mind as we flip back and forth. We're going to go back over to the 5e to finish that out. We talked about the gate itself is an enormous gear that click, 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 click on a regular point. Now, you can enter the gear as the portal whenever you, at any point, but depending on where the gear is going to determine where you come out of on the far side. So in order to legally enter the gate, your party's going to have to go through and fill out forms in triplicate and provide information and provide this and okay, take these 3 completed forms over there and get the next 25 forms to fill out for the next guy down. And it's this horrifyingly huge bureaucracy that doesn't bother the Modrons at all, but just it's going to drive mortals and an average human player is going to go insane, man. Basically, you're doing a DMV session for them. So that's where the underground can come in for your player characters. The balancing act that keeps Mechanus from sliding, Automata into sliding into Mechanus, also serves as, let's get, greasing the wheels, as it were. Yeah, I can get you through the gate. Yeah, I can get you the paperwork. Yeah, whatever. The criminal underground, as it were. So, the Great Modron March is mentioned, a 289-year event, 17th Grand Cycle, which it takes the largest gear in Mechanus, 17 cycles equals 289 years, which equals time for them to go on their march. On at least one occasion, the march came early, and legions of Modrons wreak widespread havoc as they trample across the plains. That's in reference to the Modron March to the Dead God campaigns that came with the 2nd edition book. Check my module review series for those as I work my way through the dozens of modules that I have. Not hundreds, almost 100, but different story. So, noteworthy sites, the Concord Terminus is something that's 5th edition's precise. There is no reference to a train system that runs from Mechanus to Automata and to other places. This is, take it what you will. I don't like it, but it's there. The Divine Machine is a named tavern. This is a site and a location that you can use in either version of Automata to provide a tavern. The Hall of Order talks about the government building. And that's really it for the Outer Planes book. So that's the first 5th edition book we're going to look at. Let's look at the actual adventure itself. So the Adventure Fortune's Wheel gives us a little bit more information about some of the gate towns. Again, almost no information about the Outer Plane. Let's finish with the gate town. So exploring Automata reinforces the gate, gives you some information about the people that are guarding the gate, in this case 4 Pentadrons and a Decaton, making sure that people don't go through if they're not supposed to. You have to have your approval before you approach it. How do you access the gate? A little bit more information on each of the non-player characters that your party might have to deal with as they try to get through the gate. Their whole goal is to get their little skull to the gate, push a button, get some information, go to the next town. The goal of this adventure isn't even to push your party through the portal in most cases. Okay, but let's be honest. This. You're gonna get your party right up to a portal to the outer plane and tell them no, you can't go through. That doesn't feel right. But you're not equipped with the 5th edition stuff to go through that portal. That's where I'm coming in, hopefully. I want to encourage you guys to dig into some of the older resources. You can make these playable areas. Okay. A little bit of information about the inverse, which is similar to the underground. This is the part that keeps Automata anchored to the neutral plane of the Outlands. This is the criminal underground. This is where everything's dirty, everyone's grungy, no one follows rules, so on and so forth. The chaotic part that keeps the town anchored. So your party may or may not deal with this. I don't know. That's up to you to play with. But the information is given. Should your party need to deal with the inverse in order to gain access to the portal. That's it. That's the 5th edition stuff in a 10-minute nutshell. So let's take a look at the 2nd edition information that comes available. Again, we're looking at a player's primer to the Outland. We're looking at the book about Mechanus from the box set Planes of Law. And we're looking at the original description for Mechanus from the 2nd edition Planescape Boxed set. Okay? So we'll start with the same kind of view. Automata, 10,000, reported as less in some volumes. Here's a small little map that shows the layout, which coincides perfectly with our 5th edition description. Orderly buildings, all looking the same, set up at 90-degree angles with streets running parallel and perpendicular in perfect order with the large gear in the middle of the town. And a simple town map you can use. They talk about the large gap that's sitting here because it's been designed to accommodate the Modron March. Whenever the march starts, the Modrons start streaming out of this gate here in Automata, so they go straight out the gate, out the front door, and onto their thing. Okay? Again, we're getting information about the council. In this case, there's one difference in the names. Artemis is still in charge of the military. Seraphil's still in charge of the temple, but we've replaced the 5th edition replaces a person named Pelnus the Clockmaker with a Modron. You can use either; it doesn't matter. They're just minor personalities to add to your town. Instead of it being called the inverse, it's called the underground. Twisted passageways, hiding holes, concealed lairs, forbidden temples. It's got all the darkness and unrest swept down from the world above. Here the Council of Anarchy rules, and anything's fair game. A lot of planers support the area because Automata would instantly become part of Mechanus if it wasn't there. So that's it. Everything here reinforces what we know in 5e. There's really no difference. I think this book gives you a tiny little bit more flavor, but not enough to feel like you're missing out on. So then both books leave us in the same spot. There's a big portal that goes somewhere else. What do we do with it? Well, that's where we're going to go to Mechanus itself. Oh, excuse that bump. Our party has completed their triplicate forms. They've made the right bribes, or they've dared the broken through the patrols and gotten to the portal. What next? Now they go to Mechanus, the plane of lawful neutrality. A few primes think this place is called Nirvana, but it's sometimes called the Clockwork Universe. Mechanus is a world of giant cogs that hover in space at all angles. Teeth interlock and the cogwheels click and turn to the rhythm of some cosmic harmony, all perfectly fitting for the plane of ultimate cold law. Mechanus exists for nothing but law and order. Not good, not evil, just law. Everything is interlocked on the plane. Some of the cogs are just a couple feet across. Some of them are dozens and dozens of miles across, hundreds of miles across even. And then we get into the description of, remember when we talk about 2nd edition, we have plane, then we have layer, then we have realm or region, and then we have locations, okay? In most cases, in every case, that's how the information is broken down. Some of the books don't give us an example of each for each plane. Others give us plenty, but we'll go through all of it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is Regulus, which is the main layer. This is the home layer for Modrons, where Primus lives. Gigantic. It's considered the largest of the layers. No one's sure how big, if it's one gear or thousands of gears interlocked, but it's huge. Modrons do their thing. For the most part, very few people have reason to go to Regulus. Okay, Anu. And now this is where we have reference to old literary mythological beings. Anu is a Babylonian god. Babylonian mythology was part of second edition, as was Hindu mythology, as was Egyptian mythology, Celtic, North, etc., Norse, etc. So be prepared for that. There is a lot of mention of pantheons, of historic pantheons of beings that live in these places. Such as Shang-Ti, the celestial emperor himself, the head of the celestial bureaucracy, has a place out on Mechanus. Food dogs and the peaches of immortality and all that kind of stuff is mentioned here. The outer realms include the smaller discs, Varuna, Rudra, Yama, some mention of some of the other deities, and their associated pantheons would be drawn onto the disc, as it were, that they live on. All of them are orderly, some of them are dark, some of them are good, so you would, as a dungeon master, this is where you get to play with it a little bit. It's not just cold calculating steel. It could be these perfectly ordered rose gardens where every rose has the exact same petals aligned at the perfect point. However you want to play with it, good or bad, it doesn't matter as long as it's in absolute order, especially for the powers. Okay? The gravity of each disc is in proportion to where you're standing on the disc. Each face has opposing gravity. You could walk off the lip and continue walking this way just perfectly fine either way. It wouldn't matter. And then we get into the special physical conditions. Magical conditions, illusions, and phantasms automatically fail on this plane. If you're using that as part of your campaign stuff, take note that 5th edition or 2nd edition, had a heavy emphasis on magical effects, alignment, the powers of the planes, the alignments of the plane, having specific effects or restrictions on what kind of magic players could use when they're there. If you choose to do that or not, that's up to you. The information is given in both box sets. Then it talks about their beings, and Einhar, Maruts, and Modrons are native. Powers who dwell here include Anu, Horus, Primus, Rudra, Shang-Ti, Varuna, and Yama. Helm and Mystra from Forgotten Realms are also said to dwell here. And so that's it. A little bit more, not much. A little bit more, though. Still doesn't sound like a really fun place to go on an adventure. Sounds like enough information if my party walked through the portal that they could, I could describe the other side of the portal to them effectively and make it seem like a mechanical, strange place. But still, we're lacking, why are we going here? Obviously, that's always up to you as the Dungeon Master, why are we going here? But let's see if it's a little bit more interesting than it looks like on its surface. This is the Planes of Law box set, the book dedicated to Mechanus as a plane. Okay, a little bit more information on getting around the planes, a little bit more information on the physical conditions, as far as it doesn't matter if you breathe water, whatever you breathe, you can breathe here just fine. Every creature can understand each other, speaking in their own native language, kind of like the good place. Oh, I speak French, but you understand me perfectly in your own language. I'm not necessarily saying a good place, but an orderly place at least. Information about the gears ranging from the size, which we've talked about, just more detail about each of those things. Big emphasis on the law. Assuming that we're setting this up for players, we have to be prepared for player behavior. Part of the challenge is on a plane dedicated to absolute order and lawfulness. Our chaos demons in our groups are the player that's the agent of chaos, that no matter if everyone wants to go left, then they want to go right. If the group agrees to pay for it, then she wants to steal it. Whoever that person is, they're going to have a hard time on the plane of law, because as far as Mechanus is concerned, law is more important than life. If you cannot adhere to the laws around you, then your life is not worth living, and it is forfeit. So the punishment for almost any transgression is death. Because if you can't adhere to a law, you can't learn a law. Therefore, your antithesis to their existence. You can't exist in their presence. So you're going to get killed, or occasionally. Feel free to exile, banish, whatever you want to do if you just don't want to be heavy-handed around it. But make sure you're prepared to emphasize the lawful, orderly nature of this plane as your party walks through it. If they pull the one rose off of the bush and leave the perfect line of roses with one gap, everyone is going to notice it. It's that kind of place. That's not right. What's up with that? Oh, that guy has a... Oh, hey, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right. So this is that kind of a place. Anything out of order or out of law is not right. Okay? A little bit more of an emphasis on magical conditions. If you use spell keys, if you use power keys as part of your campaigns, information is given for that. Second edition mechanic that adds a lot of flavor to your campaigns, but adds a lot of record keeping. We'll talk about that kind of in its own episode, as it were. We're talking about Mechanus. So again, we kind of reinforce the powers versus the proxies. Helm and Mishra share a realm here. Primus rules over 64 cogs and perhaps the machinery of the multiverse. Mistra travels to Arcadia to hang out with Ozith, but she's got a home here. Nine Okami of the Earthquake, Shang-Chi in the Jade Palace of Judgment, Rudra the Diseased, Varuna, Upholder of the Cosmic Order, and Yama, the First of the Dead, and Judge of the Dead all have realms here. Silofir, the Lord of the Myconids, has a place here. Horus supposedly has a place here, etc., etc. So anything, if you're using in those pantheons, you have information to add them to the outer realm of their alignment. Understood alignment, I guess you could say. But you also have the freedom to exclude or move them around however you can justify, man. And then proxies are just discussions of the main representatives of people. Mistra's proxy is Twalitha Daysbreak. It's not Gale from Waterdeep. I'm kidding. I do love me some Baldur's Gate, but yeah. Anyway, the petitioners are many shapes and sizes. They're frighteningly honest, for the lying is inviting chaos. Exceedingly liberal, for to interpret is to invite chaos. They're so afraid of misinterpreting a command because of vagaries in the language, they simply won't take the instructions. They would rather say, no, I can't do that, instead of try to understand what you want them to do. A lot of fun roleplay opportunities if you're a wordsmith or if you enjoy playing word games with your players. The idea of Mechanus and the inhabitants of that can be a challenge. Bunch of information for Modrons is given here as well. The Modrons are the primary inhabitants of Mechanus, and odds are that's most of the time what your players will encounter. Doubly so if things go hot. If words were exchanged and swords are drawn and spells were cast, odds are the Modrons are going to be involved. And it's important to understand how the structures and the case and the communication systems of the Modrons work, to make sure that you're able to play them out. Just real brief aside on that. Modrons are interesting creatures. There's, I guess we're up to 15 levels of them now. No, I think we've gotten 10. No, I think we got 15 of them now, statistically speaking. But there were 15. Primus made 16 back in Yonday. Modrons up to Penta, up to Ultima. Yeah, so many different Greek, names for the is all in reference to arms, sensory organs, and facets of the body. Like a pentadrone looked like a crazy ass starfish on legs, with each of the 5 branches being equidistant from each other, having eyes and appendages off. Horror creatures, man, crazy, spooky looking shit. Dedicated to order, but yeah. So a Modron can only speak with the caste above it and below it. So your monodrone, your little Mike Lebowski round, little one big eye, smiley face, arms, legs, running around type thing, which constitutes probably 90% of the Modrons that your party is ever going to interact with. They don't even talk to anything aside from yes, no answers to the duodrone above them. The duodrone above them can give the monodrone an order in a yes/no binary format, and then they can communicate with the tridrone above them, and it goes on and on and on. But the monodrone doesn't even know that the quadrone exists. They might see it, but they don't recognize it as as part of their communication chain of command. Even if the Quadrone told the Tridrone to tell the Duodrone to tell the Modrone to go sweep that pile up, the Monodrone is not even aware of the Quadrone's existence. So that's the plus side, is if your players start getting into some shit, there's this whole huge chain of command that has to go into effect before every Modron in the entirety of Infinity piles down and stomps your players into paste that they have to clean up. So yay for that. That's, again, we're talking from adventure gameplay mechanical point of view. The Modrons are the single largest threat from a combat point of view that your player is going to face here. In a random encounter situation, you're in Mechanus, land of lawful neutral. Randomness is not part of the equation here, even if we still use random encounters. You still, I know I'm being facetious, but at the same time, you got to make sure that the random encounters that you're using seem ordered and seem structured and seem like they're supposed to be there, because nothing is supposed to not be in its place on Mechanus. And including your players, if they're not where they're supposed to be, they're going to raise eyebrows. They're going to raise awareness around them. They could potentially trigger some encounters. So the Infinite Gears is a short section that talks about a couple of locations, locations within Mechanus. That, whether it's a site for an adventure or a site to base yourselves from as they go through Mechanus. Players need somewhere to be able to stop for a second. And we need to be able to give our players that kind of place to stop for a second. So you get some options here. They talk about both the physical layout, some of the personalities that your players might run into, and the general philosophies and behaviors towards outsiders. Whether you use the Fortress of Disciplined Enlightenment directly for yourself, or whether you just use it as a reference for something smaller, the information is good and it's consistent to let you structure what you need. But I do want to point out Mycelia here, because this is one of those things that perfectly goes against the grain, so to speak. At this picture here, you see this castle perched up on a gear floating in space with gears and rods below it. Yes, that's the idea of Mechanus. Down here you see the strange, it looks like the battlements, if you will, of a building, encasing this small valley. That's Mechanus as well. It's not just pure steel everywhere. You've got hills and gardens and water. It's just got to all be orderly. Mycelia is kind of an extension of that. Mycelia is the idea that myconids, mushroom dudes, are lawful neutral, because the epitome of them is pure order and harmony of society of their own through shared experience and shared knowledge. Mushroom versions of Modrons, kind of in a roundabout sort of way. He's an intermediate. Silofar is an intermediate power controlling this realm. It's a still cavern, mushrooms growing on the sides of rotted logs, the cool texture of firm fungus on a feverish brown, the sweet sour promise of dripping water, an empty cavern. That's the feel, that's the character of this place. It's hidden from most who seek it. Okay. So this is where you get into some funky philosophy here. Before we get to why we seek it, or before we even worry about how do we get there, let's worry about if it's worth going to. And once again, we're in lawful neutral land, so it's tough. It's awful tough unless your players are sheer agents of chaos to give them anything more than a MacGuffinish kind of a reason to come to Mechanus. For the most part, that can change, But anyway, the realm of Silofar, adventure setting, somewhat uniqueness, very interesting. Standing at the top of a stair coming into a gear, a body can see an immense cavern hollowed out inside this great gear. The cavern has got to be at least 100 miles across, but a player can still see to the far side of it with ease. The cavern's perfectly rounded. All the stalactites and stalagmites perfectly ordered, so it's clear they were placed that way on purpose. The smell of long decayed organic matter wafts gently up past one's nose. A smell almost sweet and never nauseating. The light's a dim purple and it emanates from the giant mushrooms covering the floor like a carpet. Closer inspection of the floor reveals its mulched organic matter, though its origin isn't exactly certain. It's all covered with damp and dew, and tiny fungi spring up throughout the realm. Some say these are the unformed bodies of myconids preparing to be reborn within this realm. So be careful walking around them. Myconids wander all over us, so the whole mind control spores and all that kind of thing here kind of continues. There's no towns. The myconids all live together under the roof of the Great Gear. The only structures of the Palace of Silafar are a huge hollow mushroom in the center of the realm. The mushroom's in the middle of a lake that is apparently bottomless. No one's ever reached the bottom, and Silafar keeps everyone away from its house. There's no reaching it if he doesn't want anyone there. So what's interesting about it, if it wasn't interesting enough to have a gigantic mushroom cavern on the inside of a metallic gear 100 miles across, you can't find it. As it's been said before, there's no approaching the kingdom, the realm of Mycelia, unless a body, second edition Planescape for a player, unless a player is moving away from it, and you can't find it unless you're not seeking it. It's a paradox of nonviolence, a thought pattern Silafar established to keep those out whose minds are too turbulent to understand what Mycelia offers. While in Mycelia there can be no violence, those who entertain violent thoughts find themselves transported away across Mechanus without their companions. To find their way back, they must atone for their transgressions and vow to relinquish the control of themselves for judgment by the circle when they return, if they ever do. And a lot of times they find you guilty of your transgression, they turn you into a fungus man. And then the air within the cavern is filled with the myconid spores. Every hour that you're there, save versus poison or be affected by one of the 6 types of the spores they produce. You can wear a mask to minimize the effects of it. For those with the proper attitude, there's all kinds of stuff here, poultices, potions, inks, and all that kind of crazy stuff. So if you need to invest in some sort of strange biologics, if you want to go heavy into that, if you're a fan of Zugtmoy or any crazy stuff like that, Mycelia can suddenly become a viable campaign point. Outside of assaulting the Fortress of Disciplined Enlightenment that the governors keep on a gear up here to maybe rescue a prisoner, you have the fungus thing going in there. Maybe you have to defend this fungus people from a demonic incursion from Zugtmoy. Nemesis is another realm. The thin line between neutrality is good is one easily crossed. Nemesis is actually the 3rd layer of Arcadia that was pulled over the borderlands and into Mechanus because of the nature of the layer's inhabitants. Nemesis is a picture of the fact that even though planes are planes and they're infinite in nature and they're absolute in power, they can also shift around. Nemesis used to be part of Arcadia, and it's now part of Mechanus. So this is a place of conflict. This would be an ideal adventure ground, grounds for adventure, grounds for adhering to our normal Dungeons and Dragons tenets of exploration, role-playing combat without worrying about an overwhelming mass of Modrons showing up at any point in time to end things. There might be people that are still stuck. There are people that are still stuck in Nemesis. There are people that are Nemesis, I should say. There are people that are moving into it, moving about it, trying to find it, because basically the entire realm shift. Some of the people were stuck with it. Some of them that weren't left. So you have this desolate former realm that's now part of a new realm that's slowly reshaping itself to fit, full of treasure, full of wonder, full of items, full of people that need to be rescued, and about to start facing a assimilation and cleansing by the Modrons. So it's a fun place. This is once a place where practitioners as the former 3rd layer of Arcadia, this is a cog richly forested and verdantly covered. Though the grasses all grow to a certain height and the trees march in straight lines, there's a certain recklessness here, the result of the freed essence of the chaotic creatures who were once imprisoned in Nemesis. Though they no longer linger in the realm, finding Mechanus far too orderly, a little piece of them remains behind, making free thinkers of those who come here. It's still a part of Mechanus, so the effect is limited merely to imaginative daydreams or horrifying nightmares. There's still Arcadian petitioners on the plane, but they've learned something of the chaos and hatred for those who restrain the good to be found in Nemesis. So the problem here is where Arcadia used to be, good was one of the determining factors. Where it's at now, good and evil doesn't matter. You will follow the rules. And real quick, let's just look at where is Arcadia via Fortitude. So it's lawful good, lawful neutral with good tendency. You see the big crumble area here. It looks like a piece is drifted. I think they did a good job with that art, showing that it's fragmented. So even there, it's respects given to the second edition stuff, even in 5th edition. Hats off. But so there's a lot of going on here in regards to when a plane is in transition. This is certainly a great source for a great site for adventures. If you find your player find yourself in Mechanus, and you find yourself in Mechanus on a Friday, what do? Maybe go down into Mossus and rescue some people that are trapped there. You can go raid an old tomb before the Modrons get there and assimilate it. On and on and on and on. Regulus is the home of the Modrons proper. This is, thirsty day today. Your party's not going to have a ton to do here as a whole, but there is an awesome site here, the Modron Cathedral. This is more of a playing with your brain exercise and mentality more than anything else. Basically, the Modron Cathedral is this gigantic spire that has an orrery in the middle of it that reflects the movements of the entire multiverse. The central feature of the place is the orrery, a gigantic model of gears that are constantly spinning and moving about. Modrons occasionally perch on the orrery, swabbing or scuffing one place or another. The symbol is on the sphere that rotate about the central point, a needle that rises into the steeple of the cathedral. The symbols, as if a body can get close enough, those are the planes, suggesting that this is a working model of the multiverse. Those who watch the orrery long enough might be able to decipher its meaning. It is a model of the multiverse, incredibly detailed and infinitely complex. Those who concentrate on a particular feature or place on the orrery find themselves drawn closer in. If they focus in the correct way, it's possible to use the orrery as a giant scrying device, seeing what transpires on the planes outside of the cathedral. So that's kind of a cool location, man. That's kind of something you could have a lot of fun with as your players visiting it, or as a potential antagonist that's taking control of it. And before we get too far, yes, I did make a big deal about all the Modrons being hyperpowered. There being so many of them. Remember the chains of communication. If the people below a certain point believe the order to be true, they don't question where the order came from. So in certain situations, there have and will always, and there will continue to be, beings of enough power to step in and usurp control of sections of Modron society for brief periods of time, because that's the downside of unquestioning order. It's unquestioning. If the order from above came through proper channels and represented what was supposed to be done, the entire pyramid of Modrons below it follow that order as it's supposed to be. So, that's kind of where we're, that's a controlling factor for you as a DM to make sure that players don't get overwhelmed. And that's also a great plot point to introduce chaos to the plane of Mechanus and give your players something to do here. What if a Sesserac was able to take control of the orrery, for example? I know I'm just name dropping here. It wouldn't be a Sesserac. He's a demi-lich. He couldn't be floating around out here anyway. I would say Igwil, but she's entirely too chaotic. She'd vapor. That's like a vampire walking into a church. But you get my drift. If an antagonist that you, as a dungeon master, was able to create, can put themselves in position to usurp command over a certain facet of Modrons and the function of Mechanist society, ultimately affecting how the planes are running, that suddenly becomes a big thing. And just so you know, the Dead Gods, the module, we'll again look at my module review about that, is all about that thing, working alongside the Great Modron March. Those are two campaign books that can work together. Don't necessarily have to discuss what happens if someone takes control of all the Modrons at one moment in time. Wonderful concept, wonderful idea. So to close out our little bit of a review here, the mechanical adventures. This is just a description, description of some things that can be happening within Mechanus mechanical adventures. What are my players doing while they're here? Why would I want my players to come here? How obviously you can make your own stories, you can make your own drivers, but one of them is the ghost in the machine. We talked about the machine spirits earlier. Maybe some chaotic imps are going through here. The outline, when a body's a mechanist, they should know the laws. Unfortunately, not all the laws are obvious, and it's easiest to break a law in the Clockwork universe. The player characters are bound to break one sometime, and as relatively clueless Burks, they're under watch from the governors. Or they snuck into Mechanus, or they're wearing the wrong color clothes for the day of the week. Whatever happens, the governors see them, see as an opportunity to show where the boss is, where the po-po, and you're going to do some stuff. So they get arrested. They get charged with something minor, some little bullshit. They stand trial for the crimes, and they're charged with a maintenance job. They have to go to have to go assist washing a cog. It'll take 10 years for the party to fully polish this gear. Okay, so yeah, like right off the bat, you're like, okay, hold on, man. You're gonna tie your party up for 10 years? No, you just want the threat to be there for them. So they'll do a full day of polishing off and this, that, and the Modron, I guess, is it a Modron or a Tridrone that's in charge of them here? A Tridrone hands them scrub brushes and buckets and says, get busy. At 20-minute intervals, it makes sure they're still working and brings them nourishment occasionally at intervals. As long as they do their job, it treats them well. If they begin to shirk their duties, it brings in reinforcements to remind them how to do their jobs. All of a sudden, he shows up like clockwork 21 minutes and 33 seconds later. And then all of a sudden, he doesn't show up. And after a half hour, he doesn't show up. And after a little bit longer, all of a sudden, he didn't show up. And they start getting worried they're going to be blamed because this dude disappeared. So then they got to go figure out what happened to their gatekeeper, and there's chaos imps that are beating this poor dude up. They're able to rescue him for the imps and get some good points and move on with their story. This is like a side quest, a one-off type of adventure to help introduce the lawful nature of Mechanus to your party with seemingly overblown consequences while giving them an opportunity to work their way out of it. Haywire is actually a pretty interesting mission, short adventure, in that this is where your party really has to show some discernment, because rogue Modrons are a certain thing. Every once in a long while, a Modron goes rogue. It's usually a result of a promotion, as in they're not ready for going up the next rank. They suddenly realize how much power they have. They go rogue, or on occasion, Primus, the main creator, tries to induce chaos into an occasional Modron to see if they can plan for chaos. Because for them, that's the ultimate goal, is if we can plan controlled chaos, then we control both sides of the coin, and true chaos can go to hell. Well, not figuratively speaking. So basically, a rogue Modron is an insane Modron. So for whatever reason, a high-ranking Modron, which is a Nonaton, which in 5e is a big-ass Modron, it slipped over the edge. It's smart enough to know at this point, because it's worked its way up through the scale, its chances of survival are slim to none. But because it's a high-ranking Modron, it's got an unquestioning power structure below it. So it tells all of the Modrons below it that there's a rogue Modron coming for him. Hey, we've located a rogue Modron. Let's get ready to fight. So all of its Modrons below them are aware of this. Now, the party gets drawn into this because another Nonaton approaches the party and says, there's a rogue Modron. This rogue Modron has a power structure under it that's going to follow its orders because they don't know any better. You guys need to go deal with this rogue Modron, and we will pay you exactly 2,137 gold to complete this mission. Just kill the Modron, kill the Nonaton. Everything else will fall back into its normal order. Here's your reward. Cool, right? Seems simple. So your party rolls up to this other Nonaton, and this other Nonaton says, greetings, we've been expecting you. Actually, we were expecting you 11 minutes prior. Apologies for whatever delayed your arrival. The plane foretold your arrival, so on and so forth. My job now is to lean into it and say, yes, this all makes sense. It would figure that the rogue nonaton would try to use some outsiders to usurp the balance of Mechanus. It knows it cannot gain any other resources from any of the structure within Mechanus. All of the other Modrons are aware of the rogue's existence. So obviously it's going to use you to depose me so it can further usurp the forces under my command, increase its power. I'll pay you 2,137 gold pieces, the exact amount, to return and deal with that nonaton. Okay? Now you need to announce that number right out the gate. In both cases, it should be a fixed number. It's non-negotiable. It's not like, what are we looking at here? What will you pay me? That should be part of the offer. So that way, what we start doing with this adventure is really putting our players into a position of, which one of these is actually the rogue? If you play it well enough, your party should not know. And honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't really kind of matter. You can make it matter. If they assist the rogue, then all of a sudden there's this major destabilizing event in Mechanus, and things really spiral out of control. And you can have a lot of fun building on that as a dungeon master. If you're just kind of trying to use it as a one-off, as an introduction to order, again, the only thing that's going to matter to your players is fairness. And fairness is a moral conjecture. Fairness isn't a logic thing. They may sit there, that's not right, but that was the orderly thing to do. So if they ended up helping the wrong Modron in here, part of it, maybe they'll never know. Did we do the right thing? Who cares? We walked off with a pile of money. It could be that simple for them. But I really enjoy the roleplay ability of this. Talk about a bunch of machines that should be talking in cold logic, but this is something that you can just really lean into with identical statements from both parties that are both factually correct from the view of that nonaton, that your party can genuinely be tricked into aiding the wrong side of things. The PCs must now decide which is the true rogue, which is the one empowered by its superiors. The easiest way for them to do this, now it's super simplified. If your parties know how Modrons work, if your party has been paying attention and understands the hierarchy of orders, they can solve it in one question. Let's return to Regulus and talk about this, or let me talk to your supervisor. The Modron that is able to, say, okay, no problem, and send for them is the true Modron. The other one that hems and haws is going to be the rogue. So it's something that's really easy to build into, but it's super simplified. It's kind of almost a quiz. Think of it as a test of your player's knowledge. If they've been paying attention, they should be able to solve it like that. If they haven't been paying attention, it could turn into this huge, crazy-ass ordeal. But, like I said, just a nice, fun adventure that gets you into the idea of what goes on in the Outer Planes, especially specifically in Mechanus. We're getting to the end of time here, the end of time, figuratively and literally. That's funny. But this last adventure is called The End of Time, and this is talking about what happens if a part of a plane tries to leave, kind of like how we talked about the realm earlier that switched over. The end of time. There's people who seek to establish laws for everyone. There's people who want absolute law over everything. Significant difference between the two, and that's what led to the formation of the Brigadiers of Law. Your quick, brief intro talking about a splinter faction of the Fraternity of Order that decided that if a single cog is separated from the rest of Mechanus, the whole plane will come to a grinding halt. And if the whole plane comes to a halt, so does the rest of the multiverse, ceasing motion and entropy, thus creating the ultimate triumph of law. So now we're getting into this whole multiverse shifting, multiverse crashing adventure type stuff, which is what Planescape, old Planescape is well known for. They're going to cut the cog loose by rusting it heavily and then opening a gate to the plane of magma, which is a para-elemental plane, to cut through the rest of us. From there, the cog will spin off on its own, thus disrupting the machinery of Mechanus and therefore the machinery of the whole universe. So this all comes back to the fact that everything that this adventure is saying is true, in the extent that every part of Mechanus is attached to itself because of law, because of order. So if one part of this is to detach because of law, because of order, it could potentially break the entire machine. This is a higher level adventure. They'll go through the labyrinth to the fortress. The fortress, Lady Garabutos, which is the factal that lives here, gives them a place. Where an ambush happened and tells the party to get busy. So they'll eventually follow the trail back to Acheron. So now we start crossing over into different planes. They'll run into a group of Modrons that are cleaning up the corpses of rust monsters and a very young pair of rust dragons. The huge crates which were marked were packed. Which the creatures were packing are currently being burned. Excuse me. The crates are marked with their points of origin, which points the party to Acheron, so they can head back to Acheron, find out that the Mercy Killers are supporting the splinter faction of the Harmonium in destroying everything here. And then at this point, they'll go back to Mechanus and end up on this new plane, a section of Mechanus, the plate, the realm where the Brigadiers of Law are currently trying to break the gear clear. Bunch of combat, bunch of fighting, a rust dragon, magma men, all kinds of crazy stuff with a timed event that could potentially disrupt the entire multiverse if it goes wrong. And then the end result is up to the DM. If they succeed in their plan, does time stop? Does the universe grind to a halt? Or does the gear float off into space to add its matter to another plane? If they're successful in stopping the plot, they deal with rust dragons and rust monsters all over the plane of ultimate law. It doesn't have to be the players' mop-up work, but it can be. No matter what happens, the remnants of the Brigadiers of Law will look for the players in the universe. So I know I'd do a quick summary on that one. But yeah, the information that's given within this book, this final book, will really help you decide if you decide that you want to play with Mechanus, if you decide that your players go through the gate town of Automata and like what they see, and then you've taken them a couple steps more, they want to get involved, and then they really like the strangeness of this, and you want to make some good, big adventures out of it. Buy those books. I'm sorry, my screen. One last time, beg, borrow, steal, however you want to add them to your collection. But yeah, the Player's Primer to the Outland is perfectly in line with the 5th edition, the Outland Sigil in the Outlands chapter about Automata. One name is the only difference. They replaced Juliet 314 replaces our non-player character known as Pelnis the Clockmaker. Other than that, it's like identical. Okay, cool there. If you already have Player's Primer of the Outland, you don't need a 5th edition book. Straight up, you really don't. If you don't, add it. The next step is the box set, which gives you just another page, a lot more information than 5th edition gave us, just enough to wet your whistle. Dive into the Planes of Law, the box set about that side of the cosmic wheel. You get into a lot more information that takes Mechanus and goes from talking about it to fleshing it out to giving us adventure areas, behaviors, and even adventure ideas. So, yeah. Guys, thank you for your time. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review of Automata to Mechanus, 5th edition meets 2nd edition. We're going to continue touring our way around the cosmic wheel as we go, talking about each of the outer planes in the same format. Above all else, it's just, hoping that, through the time and learning this, you're finding that there's a lot out there to play with. And even some of the more lame and mundane areas can really give us some fun adventure ideas. As long as you're leaning into the theme and the idea of each of the outer planes and being consistent in the supporting of it, you can always create adventures and you can always create plots and opportunities and conflicts for your players as they move through the outer planes. 5th edition walks you up to the portal and then tells you to go the other way. I'm here to tell you, man, walking up the portal, that's the first step. Walking through that portal is that's where the multiverse starts, okay? So yeah. Whether you've been here for the few minutes at a time or the whole time, thank you for your time. I'd love to hear back from you on your comments. Any questions, anything else that you guys want me to emphasize, feel free to leave it down in the comments. But yeah, Planescape 5th edition meets 2nd edition, Gate Town to Outer Portal, and we'll keep it on going. Likes, follows, subscribes. Feel free to share this if you think you know anyone that might be interested in it. Share my channel with them. Head on over to Twitch once in a while. I'm over there chatting Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Happy to chat about this stuff with you in live as well. But above all else, thank you for sharing your time with me. Be safe.